July 3rd, 1883, Prague, Czech Republic. Franz Kafka was born, arguably one of the greatest and most impactful writers of the 20th century, and a person that managed to affect the souls of millions of people without even knowing it. Kafka was an Ashkenazi Jew, raised in a traditional German Jewish household. His father was authoritarian and demanding, and his mother was quiet and shy. The family owned a fashion retail business that was doing quite well. His upper middle class, religious and strict upbringing clearly affected his character. He was a highly intelligent person that was questioning dominant narratives of his time and often found himself alienated. After finishing high school, he was admitted to the Deutsche Karl Ferdinands Universität of Prague in 1901. After graduation in 1907, he started working for different insurance companies, but he found the work quite tedious, actually claimed to despise it. But he considered it Brotberuf, literally bread job in German, meaning something that could help him make ends meet. Writing was his true passion, and he viewed every other form of work as a distraction. Despite all the inner and outer struggles he had to face, he managed to complete several works, mainly novels and short stories. What little was published during his lifetime attracted negligible public attention. Probably that was the main reason he burned almost 90% of his writings. Kafka was diagnosed with tuberculosis in 1917, and this tortured him until his death. In 1923, he moved to Berlin to concentrate on his writing, but came back to Prague in 1924 due to the severity of his illness. He died June 3rd, 1924. Most of his novels were published post-mortem by his close friend Max Brod, despite the fact that Kafka instructed him in his will to destroy them. Kafka wrote to Brod, "Dearest Max, my last request, everything I leave behind me, in the way of diaries, manuscripts, letters, my own and others, sketches, and so on, is to be burned unread." Although Kafka wasn't a philosopher, his works were deeply philosophical. I mean, how couldn't they be? Kafka was an avid reader and also deeply engaged in political matters. His Jewish background, his studies, and his work, merged with his socialist and anarchist inclinations, served as the bedrock for the molding of a personality that would develop a surrealist and anti-systemic view on reality. The tremendous world I have inside my head, but how to free myself and free it without being torn to pieces? And 1,000 times rather be torn to pieces than retain it in me or bury it. That indeed is why I'm here. That is quite clear to me, Kafka wrote in his diary. Kafka was destined to change our perception and understanding of novels and storytelling. His work echoes ideas so visceral and so central to all of us that it's impossible to not resonate with them. So much so that we have a word that alludes to Kafka's style. That word is Kafkaesque. The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines something as Kafkaesque when it has a nightmarishly complex, bizarre, or illogical quality. I like Kafka because I often find myself trapped in situations that can clearly be defined as Kafkaesque. I'm sure you have found yourself too. There is a small Kafka inside us all. So let's dive a bit deeper into the Kafkaesque and understand Kafka's world a bit better. The trial takes place in a surreal and somewhat dystopian setting. Joseph K., the chief cashier of a bank, is arrested in his flat on the morning of his 30th birthday. The people who arrest him are two unidentified agents from an unspecified agency for an unspecified crime. The narrative of the story is quite frustrating and perplexing because we follow the life of Joseph K. in his attempt to find out the reason for his trial without much success. He visits some weird courthouse where he doesn't get any clear answers and instead forms weird relationships with the people working there. Some of the relationships are aggressive, some are flirtatious, some are human. It feels like a dream most of the time. Back in his flat, which is part of a bigger house with more tenants owned by Frau Grubach, Joseph K. tries to form a more intimate relationship with one of the tenants, Fräulein Böstner, who doesn't really reciprocate his advances. The story continues with more surreal encounters. The agents that arrested him getting whipped inside a storage room by a flogger for asking Kay for bribes, his uncle visiting him and trying to introduce him to a lawyer that can help him with his imaginary case, a sexual encounter that he has with Lenny, a nurse that accompanies his uncle. Eventually, Joseph ends up in a cathedral where a priest tells him a fable that is meant to explain his situation. At the end of the story, Joseph is executed on the eve of his 31st birthday by two men. The story is simply enthralling and emblematic of Kafka's writing. His way of critiquing abstract power and hierarchy systems that keep us shackled within limited modes of being is unparalleled. Moreover, he manages to express his sexual and interpersonal frustrations in a very illuminating way. All characters play roles we encounter constantly in our daily lives. There is no way for one not to resonate with Joseph K. We all constantly feel that we are getting judged or trialed just because we exist. The trial was clearly influenced by Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment and Brothers Karamazov. And Kafka even went so far as to call Dostoevsky a blood relative. I would go as far as to call both of them blood relatives of mine. Kafka had a lifelong suspicion that people found him mentally and physically repulsive. It is obvious that Metamorphosis is related to this suspicion. The book is a story about a salesman, Gregor Samsa, who wakes up one morning and finds himself transformed in a huge ungeheures Ungeziefer, which is roughly translated from German as a monstrous vermin. Ungeziefer is a general term for unwanted and unclean animals. Let's call it a cockroach. Initially, he thinks that the transformation is temporary, so he accepts his predicament and lies on his bed, unable to move. While lying there, he broods over his job as a traveling salesman and the transient and superficial nature of his relationships. After a few hours, his manager, indignant about Gregor's absence, shows up in his room trying to find out what happened. His family is also there and they are all shocked with the image they have to face. The story goes on with the explanation of how different characters adapt to the new reality. His family relied on Gregor financially, and his transformation deprived his family of their financial stability. His father and mother are quite cruel with him. They are unable to accept the transformation, and they can't exhibit parental caring and empathy. His sister tries to take care of him, but eventually grows tired of this and tells her parents they must get rid of it. Gregor feels quite helpless and mistreated. In several incidents throughout the book, Gregor injures himself and this worsens his condition. Eventually he understands that he's no longer wanted and dies of starvation. The story is quite sad and depressing, but it is considered a masterpiece of 20th century literature. It's a harsh critique to his family and every family and social group that denounces weakness and everything different from them. Although the personal is invariably imbued in the story, the universal can't be extrapolated from the personal. We all feel weak, fragile, and insecure sometimes. We all feel sometimes like a burden to others. We all feel that others don't care about us. We all feel alienated and detached from reality. Kafka just reminds us that in the most dark and surreal way. Apart from his novels, Kafka wrote many short stories that reveal the breadth of his literary vision and the extraordinary imaginative depth of his thought. On one of his most famous stories titled A Hunger Artist, he tells the story of a professional fasting artist. Yes, you heard right, this artist's show, so to speak, is starving himself to death. His show in the beginning was interesting, but as time went on, interest in his form of entertainment waned. The final sentences of the story are quite poignant. A supervisor who confronts the artist asks him when he's going to stop, to which the artist replies, "Forgive me everything." The supervisor nods and agrees to forgive him. The artist insists to his self-flagellating approach and says, "I always wanted you to admire my fasting." The supervisor says that both he and the spectators did admire his fasting. The artist, however, continues on the same pattern, But you shouldn't admire it, because I couldn't find the food which I enjoyed. If I had found that, believe me, I would not have made a spectacle of myself and would have eaten to my heart's content, like you and everyone else. I consider this a deeply troubling story with many hidden messages and so many interpretations. Why did the artist do that? Was it because he wanted to prove himself? Was it because he couldn't find the right art form to devote himself to? It's not that simple. The artist's last words reveal a lot about Kafka's views on art, and especially the way that he allowed his art to consume him. When he says, "If I had found that, believe me, I would not have made a spectacle of myself and would have eaten to my heart's content, like you and everyone else," he clearly suggests that he didn't choose his art, but his art chose him. If he could just eat any other food, he wouldn't become a writer. For Kafka, writing was the only food that he could eat. During his lifetime, he didn't get any praise for his writing, but he kept writing. Or at least he couldn't accept the little praise he got from his close friends or some of the few people who admired his work. The struggle between the desire for praise, but also the rejection of praise as something frivolous, troubled him till his last day. The sense of awe Kafka's stories evoke is almost intoxicating. The essence of his work is that we come into this world and inexplicable things happen to us, things that neither we nor our environment can justify or explain. Yet we accept this absurdity and most of us support it without the need to question it. But even if we question it, it eventually consumes us till our last day. Kafka is in my head almost on a daily basis. I constantly feel that I have to fight abstract power and hierarchy systems that keep me shackled within limited modes of being. Ideas like alienation, mundanity of everyday life, the superficial nature of our relationships dominate my stream of thoughts so often that I just don't fight them anymore. I know that if I keep fighting them, they will keep pushing me towards the abyss. I accept them, I observe them, I allow them to inspire my work. I become one with the Kafkaesque and I find pleasure in it, just like Kafka did.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications and comment below something cool please, so that more people can discover it. If you want to watch more videos from my channel, check out this one and this one. Take care, see you soon. Adrian out.